It's the worst case scenario for any Formula One team. Your two drivers colliding on track in a way that has catastrophic consequences. As Mercedes puts it, rule number one for any racing team is that your two cars don't make contact. Yet that's exactly what's finally happened with Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. Their collision on the first lap of the 2023 Qatar Grand Prix cost Mercedes valuable points in its battle with Ferrari for second in the Constructors' Championship, on a day when Ferrari's second car didn't even start the race. It was also the first time Hamilton and Russell have collided in this way, and the first time since 2016 that one Mercedes has retired after contact with the other. Setting aside his particularly intense rivalries with Nico Rosberg and Max Verstappen since Lewis has been a Mercedes driver, he very rarely has the sort of collision with another driver that gets him wiped out of races completely. In fact, Hamilton has only suffered 6 first-lap retirements caused by accidents or collisions in his entire F1 career. That's a career spanning well over 300 Grand Prix and counting, which means Hamilton has retired as a result of first-lap collisions with other drivers in fewer than 2% of the F1 races he started. What that stat tells you is that Lewis Hamilton, as to be expected of a 7-time world champion with the most victories and pole positions of any F1 driver ever, is normally incredibly good at judging exactly where and how to place his car in wheel-to-wheel battles. Unfortunately, on this occasion, Hamilton's ultra-precise judgment deserted him for the second time in the past 4 races when you consider that uncharacteristic incident he had with McLaren's Oscar Piastri at Monza. In the heat of the moment, Hamilton's reaction was to blame Russell for the crash, but judging the incident on its own merit, it's very difficult to see what else Russell was supposed to do in that scenario. Hamilton didn't have enough momentum to make that pass stick. He needed more speed and or a wider line to get around that corner intact. It might have worked out better had only Verstappen been there on his inside, but 3 cars abreast into one corner very rarely works out, especially for the one on the outside, in this case, Lewis. When Hamilton first spoke to F1's media upon returning to the paddock, he told us he hadn't yet watched the incident back and that the collision had happened despite discussions with Russell before the race about working together in trying to beat Verstappen, suggesting perhaps Lewis felt Russell should have found a way to remove his own Mercedes from the situation. But later, Hamilton did tweet that the accident was 100% his fault. There was a feeling that inevitably this would come to pass at some point, given how incredibly competitive these two drivers are and the fact Mercedes chose to pair them together after losing faith in Valtteri Bottas' ability to be an effective wingman for Hamilton. Russell even shouted second race in a row over team radio after getting clattered by Hamilton, referencing their very hard wheel-to-wheel fight at Suzuka. This sort of on-track tension has been brewing for some time. Mercedes made a conscious decision to replace a clear number 2 driver with one who the team clearly believes has the necessary ingredients to one day replace Hamilton as its lead driver and championship contender. And while it's true Hamilton has enjoyed a stronger season than Russell overall and a significant gap in championship points between them has emerged, the reality of the performance differential between them is far more nuanced. In fact, Russell has not lacked anything at all in this regard. He's arguably been the quicker Mercedes driver over 1 lap in 2023. The two are almost inseparable by every qualifying performance metric. Russell is 9.8 ahead in the intra-team battle in terms of results, with an average qualifying result of 6.7 for Hamilton and 7.1 for Russell. The average lap time difference between them in qualifying is so small as to be almost negligible. That's why Russell says, in terms of performance, I feel that this season has been my best ever. The races have fallen more clearly in Hamilton's favour. He's 9-4 up in the races both have finished. That said, but for an unfortunate engine failure in Australia, plus a couple of very costly crashes in Canada and Singapore, Russell would be much closer to Hamilton in the championship table too. Ultimately, Russell's performances since he joined Mercedes have been at a very high level, and that means there is much higher likelihood that the team's 2 drivers will end up fighting over the same piece of asphalt in any given race. There's also perhaps a mindset shift at play this season too. Both of them know how to win championships. Hamilton so many times in F1 and Russell on his way up through the junior categories. They know how to play the percentages, take calculated risks when necessary, and just keep the scoreboard ticking over on the bad days. But Mercedes isn't properly competitive at the moment, which perhaps is encouraging both of them to take a few more risks than they otherwise might. When your car isn't capable, it's very easy to overreach a bit. We saw this frequently a few years ago when Verstappen was trying to carry the fight to Mercedes and Ferrari in Red Bull Renaults that weren't often up to that task. Hamilton mentioned over team radio before the start in Qatar that he wasn't particularly delighted to be starting the race on the soft tyre. Presumably, he decided the only way he could possibly convert what in his eyes was a strategic disadvantage was to absolutely go for it on lap 1 and try to lead the race. Having spent his first season with Mercedes continuously and consciously collecting those points, Russell has actively chosen to take more risks in 2023. So it's easy to imagine at the start of the Qatar Grand Prix, regardless of what was said in Mercedes pre-race discussions, that Russell's mindset was also to go for it and see if he could get ahead of Verstappen's Red Bull. Russell admitted over team radio that he wasn't even looking for Hamilton's Mercedes coming past at turn 1, so focused was he on trying to race Verstappen. So you have two ultra-competitive drivers of similar levels of ability, both with the same goal in mind, starting the race from similar positions in the same equipment, both absolutely determined to try to achieve the best result they can. Russell also said he could see no reason why Mercedes couldn't have challenged Verstappen, believing the team's race pace was better than the McLarens that eventually filled the podium, and no doubt that sniff of victory played a role in how both Mercedes drivers approached this race. When that individual ambition collided with reality, so did their cars. It's been a long time since Mercedes had to endure the sort of toxic animosity between its drivers that characterised the Hamilton-Rosberg years. By 2016, you could visibly see the distrust Hamilton felt in the environment around him. 3 consecutive seasons battling each other exclusively for the World Championship exacted a heavy toll on Hamilton, Rosberg, and the entire team. Mercedes is a much different place now, of course, much calmer and more collaborative in the wake of Rosberg's sudden retirement, Toto Wolff's decision to give Hamilton free rein, and the calming effect of Hamilton having spent 4 seasons paired alongside a driver in Bottas who simply doesn't play games. Russell served his Mercedes apprenticeship ensconced within that environment, so will know better than anyone how Hamilton works, how that version of Mercedes worked, and how it wants to work now he's replaced Bottas in the other car. Mercedes posted footage of Hamilton and Russell bro-hugging it out in the aftermath of Qatar, with the caption, "Actions speak louder than words." But what action Mercedes takes in the interest of preventing a repeat incident will be equally important. Mercedes says it plans to talk about it behind closed doors, insisting both drivers were magnanimous in dealing with the situation immediately after the race. So basically, the plan is to discuss what happened privately and move on quickly. Mercedes developed a document during the Hamilton-Rosberg years known as its Racing Intent, which was designed to establish exactly how the team should approach races and ensure the team's goals are not jeopardised by the drivers' actions. Mercedes calls 2016 a great shared experience of how to approach and learn from moments such as the collision in Qatar. The team says that will be the basis for how we talk about things and move forward. But at the same time, Mercedes is also well aware of what it calls the competitive tension between the two drivers, which is something that will only become more difficult to manage should Mercedes build a car capable of once again fighting for race victories and world championships. This tension is always a double-edged sword, capable of driving a team to new heights competitively, but just as capable of blowing up in everyone's face when the stakes are at their highest. Mercedes describes the prospect of managing such a situation as a privilege and says it actively wishes to be in that situation again and have those challenges in front of us, because of what that will ultimately say about the team's restored competitiveness should it come to pass. Maybe so, but that also means that life will become one hell of a lot harder for everyone inside that team when 2 top drivers have the ultimate prize in their sights and a car capable of giving it to them. There's almost nothing anyone can do to keep a lid on the inevitable fireworks that result.